Howdy ho, folks. It's Helminth build guide time. Yeah! This time we're gonna do Nyx. And the reason why I talked about this when I did my Valkyr build before, that Nyx and Valkyr are two Warframes, well, Prime Warframes, that have been permanently unvaulted. You can always get Nyx Prime and Valkyr Prime now, and you will always be able to get Nyx Prime and Valkyr Prime by doing railjack missions. By doing railjack missions, you can find relics with parts for Nyx Prime and Valkyr Prime. So I figured it's good if people can get some good builds going for them as well. Nyx in particular, because she might be the most underrated Warframe in the entire game. Just based on what she can do. I think most people, they pick Nyx early on as they go through the star chart, because, you know, invasion missions, you unlock them pretty early on, and then you fight against Forid, and you collect all the Nyx parts. So she's actually really easy to farm for, and she's like one of the first Warframes that you can craft for yourself. And then people craft her, and then they mess around with her a little bit, and they don't really see what the big deal with her is, and they sort of don't get how the kit works and whatnot. And then they just abandon her and never look back. Kinda. What they don't know is she's actually one of the best Warframes in the entire game. And specifically, she is the Warframe to use for doing Steel Path. Not even joking. She is such a monster in Steel Path. That's where she really shines. And she can do stuff that, like, almost no one else can do. And so if you are now in the position that, hey man, Sisters of Parvos is out. We got all these new Arcanes and all of the stuffs. So you need to farm for the Steel Essence, because you need all of these primary unlockers and secondary unlockers. And you need to kill Acolytes, because you need all of the new Arcanes. And you're like, how do I farm for them? What's, like, the easiest way of farming Acolytes and stuff? Well, it's Nyx. If you just want to have the most smooth time possible and just frying Acolytes in milliseconds, you want to use Nyx. And let me explain why. I will show you. Look, here's a couple of big, chunky, beefy, corrupted heavy gunners. And, like, I got a really good weapon, so I can kill them with this weapon. But if you just shoot here, you'll see that, like, yeah, it takes a while to whittle them down, because these guys, they've got the big, chunky armor. They got millions and billions of armor, and it's just... It's not a very efficient way of killing them. Right? But, if you are playing as Nyx, you can just do this. You go in there and you click one button. And then you just shoot them and they're dead. And you click one button. Dead. Click one button. Dead. And that's kind of insane. That's kind of insane. That's the big one. That's the big one. It is her number 2 ability. Psychic Bolts. See this? See this 100% defense reduction? She doesn't even need a whole lot of power strength for that. At like 144% power strength, I think she gets that. That is, she has the ability to just strip all defenses from enemy units. All of their armor, all of their shields. Boom. Gone. That's it. You cast it with like, it's got about 10 seconds of duration, something like that. 10, 11, 12 seconds. And it can only hit 6 targets at once. So you gotta recast it fairly often. But, you know, you hit 6 targets, and those 6 targets have all of their defenses stripped. And the thing that makes enemies in Steel Path so durable and so tanky and stuff is their like insanely scaled up armor values. They just have such insane armor, like even more than these corrupted heavy gunners have in the Simulacrum. If you face like level 200 enemies for real in the Steel Path, they have like twice the armor that these guys have. And then you just click a button. See that armor gone. And then it's like they're not even on the Steel Path. It's like you're shooting level 1 enemies. So that's one thing Nyx can do. She has another neat ability called Chaos, which is just, you know, you hit a bunch of enemies around you and they get confused and they start shooting each other instead of shooting you. It's a nice little crowd control ability. But then her big one for defense is our number 4 ability. It's called Absorb. Now, the important thing about Absorb is you need to have the augment for it. You have to. If we don't have the augment, it's called Assimilate. If I remove that, Absorb looks like this when you cast it. Whoop! See? And I can't move. I'm just standing here, and I'm immortal. If enemies shoot at me, I just absorb it. And it drains my energy to get shot at. But I absorb all damage, and then when I feel like I've absorbed as much damage as I want, I click the button again, fire it back out to hit enemies around me. Now, normally this feels janky and it doesn't feel very fun to use, and you can't really do anything. You can just stand there and like get shot at. But with the Assimilate augment, and this is like how most people do endgame Nyx builds, you can move while you're in absorb mode. Then it looks like this. Boom! And you can only walk, but you can walk you can move around, and you can fire your weapons. You can cast your abilities. You can do everything you can normally do. At the same time, you are immortal. You're immortal and nothing can hurt you, but when you get shot at, it drains your energy. So, that's kind of how you play here. Like, I've seen some endgame builds with Nyx where they remove Absorb and they don't use Assimilate, and they do some sort of shield gating stuff instead. But you clicked on this video because you wanted the easiest possible way of doing Acolytes. So we're not gonna bother with like skill testing and complicated stuff like shield gating. No, we're doing easy mode. And easy mode is Assimilate. Trust me on this, because you're immortal. And yeah, sure, there will be a limit where it's not gonna work anymore because you're just gonna get one-shotted when the enemies are up in levels of thousands and whatnot. But unless you're one of those guys who like spending like 5 hours in the same mission, and you just want to run for like maybe an hour or so, like an hour of Steel Path survival, something like that, Assimilate is going to work just fine. Now, it's a bit boring maybe that you can only walk instead of like running and shooting and parkouring, so you're just gonna walk around and shoot and kill enemies like this. But there are ways around that. There are ways you can move. You can use your melee weapon and use different sort of like combos to push yourself forward. Different melee weapons have different sort of like mobility tools. Or you can just go into operator mode, do some void dashing, get to where you want, and once you position yourself where you want to be, you just pop back into Nyx, start swinging, start shooting. So it's fine, it's fine. I've seen some people put like abilities like Reeve in her, for example, so that you can like just cast that to move around while you're in Assimilate. I think that's kind of pointless, because you can just either do void dashing, it's a perfectly fine way of moving from spot to spot, or you can just use your melee weapon and just use certain swings with certain stances to travel around, and that works. So, when I look at what I kind of want to do with the Helminth system instead, we're going Acolytes here. We want the easiest and best possible way of dealing with Acolytes, which means we want to negate every single possible defense or any single possible resistance that they might have, which is why I have infused Xata's Whisper from Zaku. Now, what this does is it simply adds void damage to your weapon attacks. That's it. And it scales with power strength. Normally you don't want a whole lot of power strength with Nyx because you kind of don't need it. But here, it chunks up the damage. It's basically like you would add another attack on top of the attack, and it does void damage. What's nice about void damage, it's twofold. Partly, it does neutral damage against everything. Nothing is weak against it, nothing is strong against it. Nothing resists void damage. And also, it resets sentient damage adaptation, just like your operator amp. So, if you infuse Xata's Whisper on a Warframe and just cast it and have void damage on your weapons, it's so much easier to kill sentients. Like, you can do it with Mesa and just like use your regulators and just unload on sentients, and they can't build up damage resistance against you, not while you have it infused with void damage. Very nice. Now, currently, with the changes to damage reduction that you've probably seen with Kuvaliches and Sisters of Parvos and stuff like that. We're sort of still figuring things out. We haven't exactly learned how these resistances work now. It does appear like Acolytes have some form of damage resistance beyond just sort of their armor or whatever. We know about how they negate damage. Not necessarily the same sort of sentient damage adaptation that, for example, the Stalker has, or the Shadow Stalker, but it could be. We don't really know for sure yet exactly how it works. So I figured, why not chuck this in to just guarantee that you're gonna negate every single possible defense. If Psychic Bolts isn't gonna strip them of all of their defense, Xata's Whisper is gonna do the final part of that. So the build is basically Xata's Whisper, Psychic Bolts, and Absorb. Those are your bread and butter. I don't use Chaos all that much. It's kind of nice for confusing enemies around you, but, you know, they melt so fast anyway, so who cares? You can use this both as a gun build and as a melee build. Both work just fine, so just use whatever you feel like. Both are going to do the trick. As for the build, there are a couple of things here. As you can see, we don't need any more armor or any health or anything like that, because we're always going to be in absorb mode, and we're immortal, so it's fine. It is kind of intensive with the mod capacity, so I threw in Steel Charge just for some extra mod capacity, and it also helps if you're doing a melee focused build. Primed Sure-Footed is actually there just because occasionally you are going to run out of energy, and you might need like a breather of a couple of seconds or something before you can either pop an energy restore or just run to some energy on the ground or whatever and pick it up. So we have Primed Sure-Footed to ensure we don't get knocked down. We have Rolling Guard, so as soon as Absorb gets popped, you just roll, you're immortal for a couple of seconds, you can stabilize, you can find a safe spot, you can get some energy back, you can recast Absorb. Also very important because one of the Acolytes, I think it's Violence, he casts Silence. So he's going to negate all of your abilities, and you're just going to be, he's going to pull you out of Absorb. For him specifically, you need to have Rolling Guard, so you can just make yourself immortal when that happens, get out of the range, recast your stuff, and you'll be fine. Primed Flow is important because this build needs a big energy pool, because you want to be in Absorb the entire time, and trust me, you're going to need a whole lot of energy because it's Steel Path, people are going to be shooting at you. You need to have a pretty high amount of efficiency as well to make this stuff work. Oh, look at that. This is even the wrong build, people. This is the wrong build. Don't use Blind Rage. That was something I was experimenting with. Here, chuck in this instead, Transient Fortitude. You'll get a little bit less power strength. That's fine. It's mostly going to affect how much the damage buff is going to be from Xata's Whisper. But mostly you really need to run with maxed out efficiency for this build. If you have... You'll notice I'm going above the breakpoint of 175. That is on purpose. When you use channeling abilities, like Absorb, stuff that uses drain over time, then the drain is determined not only by efficiency, but also by duration. So if you have less than 100% duration, you actually need to have more than 175% efficiency to cap it out and be running at maximum. So this gives plus 60% and this gives plus 30%, so it's actually plus 190% efficiency, even though it will always show the maximum value of 175. But it works. Trust me on this, it works. Go look at the tables for how you calculate this stuff. There are always, whenever I show these builds, there's always people in the comment section saying that like I'm making a mistake by using max rank on both of these because I'm going above the cap. No, people, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm going above the cap of efficiency because my duration is below 100%. Trust me on this. This is how it works. Other than that, you just need Assimilate so that you can move around while you're in Absorb. Arcane Energize is very important because you need to regain energy as fast as you goddamn can. Arcane Avenger is nice. Any sort of like on damaged effect can trigger even while you're in Absorb mode. So even though you are immortal, you can trigger on damaged effects. So this is going to give you more crit chance, which is very nice. It works well with Sentinels, because while you are immortal, your Sentinel is also immortal. So you can just chuck in a Sentinel that's running something like the Vigilante set. Give yourself a nice Vigilante mod bonus, the set bonus for that. And, you know, hey man, otherwise it's kind of hard to keep your Sentinel alive, but not with Nyx. She can do that. Other than that, if I'm using like the gun build, I'm using the Xata because I enjoy the Xata. I have a monster ribbon for the Xata, so I'm fine with that. But it doesn't really matter which gun you use when you have Nyx. It really doesn't matter. Here, like, look, I can use a goddamn Mark 1 Bratton, okay? If you're playing Nyx, you can use a Mark 1 Bratton and it doesn't goddamn matter. I'll do Xata's Whisper. I'll do Psychic Bolts. And see? It's like, see? That's why you play Nyx in the Steel Path. So, I'm using an Xata. Don't feel too threatened by that if you don't have, like, the big boy weapons and whatnot. It doesn't matter. If you're using Nyx, it does not matter which weapon you use. Just pick any. And you'll be fine in the Steel Path. She can make that happen for you. Same for the melee. I'm using a Cronen Prime here. Yeah. We got all of the crazy stuff. I'm not even using the ribbon because it's so low disposition. Who cares? Doesn't matter. None of it matters when you're playing with Nyx. Just use Psychic Bolts. Negate all their defenses. You can go at it with like the weakest goddamn weapons in the game and you're still gonna kill anything. So that's the build. That's the whole build in a nutshell. Here, I'll remove the invincibility. I mean, the paused AI. Boom. So you cast your Xata's Whisper and you look all infested and icky. Boom. And now you're here. They can't hurt you. You're immortal. You want to move around? You can use Void Dashing, or you can just use your melee stances and whatnot. And your enemies, you just hit them with your Psychic Bolts and then you melt them. And they hit them with your Psychic Bolts and then you melt them. And you hit them with your Psychic Bolts and you melt them. And there's not a whole lot they can do against you. You're kind of immortal. See? It's like, hey, shoot at me. Come on, shoot at me. I ain't taking damage. I ain't getting hurt. I can't. I'm immortal. You can see my energy ticking down there. But with such a big energy pool and with maxed out efficiency like this, you're gonna pick up energy faster than they can whittle it down. So you are effectively immortal. You're effectively immortal and any enemy you fight have no defenses. All of their defenses are negated. The only drawback is that you have to play the game like this. You have to walk around like this when you play. But, like I said, use your operator, Void Dash, use your melee stances to move forward. Take some getting used to, but it's worth it and it works. And this is Steel Path on easy mode, people. This is Steel Path on easy mode. One more thing that you need to understand about Nyx, and this is very important. Your second energy color, set that to black. Because if you have a very bright second energy color, Absorb looks like this. And you're gonna find that it's kind of annoying to play the game like this. You won't see a whole lot of what is going on the screen. So I'm just giving you a tip about that one. Very important, the most important tip of this entire video. Second energy color has to be black. Alright. Well, that's it. That's it for this build. Xata's Whisper, just to make Acolytes even more of a cakewalk than they already are. Other than that, Nyx is already the goddess of Steel Path. So just take this build, go and farm all of the Arcanes, you'll get them in a jiffy. You can just run an hour of Steel Path survival per day. You can do it with your eyes closed with this build. Trust me on this. And I will see you again tomorrow. For something completely different.